of faculty and staff colleagues met together for the course of the past year under the aegis of the CTE, the Center for Teaching Excellence, the College of Arts and Sciences, and a Davis grant to discuss student engagement and the core. Core courses are critically important courses, obviously. On the positive side, they lay the foundation for a student's learning, but they also lay the pedagogic foundation or the pedagogic expectations for students. At their best, core courses will light a fire under a student that will encourage him or her to become a major or even to work in that discipline after college. So core courses are critical, and it was central to our discussion this year. Core courses, however, are also problematic because they're required courses. They tend to be large. Because they're required courses, there tends to be a cohort of students who are there not because they want to be, but because they have to be. And those two factors put together tend to encourage a lecture approach to the material. And like core courses in general, a lecture methodology, a lecture approach to one's discipline has good and bad, as does everything. On the good side, the lecture methodology allows a faculty member to cover a lot of material, to cover a good deal of breadth. On the disadvantageous side, however, lecturing tends to encourage or can encourage passive receptivity on the part of the student. And it has recently been given the reputation for discouraging long-term learning. Consistent lecture methodology doesn't lead to long-term retention of material. The question we have to ask, and we did ask in the course of this semester, this year, is why?
So I see student engagement as a method of teaching that decenters teacher performance and puts at the center student learning. So any kind of learning experiences, learning activities that help students to master the material and really grapple with the material on their own terms.
Relating the subject to our generation, I remember taking a class of ancient history, and I was like, oh great, reading Plato and Socrates again for like, I don't know, the 20th time. And the fact that he was so passionate about the subject and able to relate it to I don't know, movies or other books that we had read, made it more, made it easier for us to relate to content and keep us focused.
One of the things I've tried to do this semester is spend more time getting to know the students and what are their concerns, what are they involved with in extracurricular activities, and somehow, especially at the beginning of the class, incorporate those into the activity. So for example, when we did Boethius, this philosopher from late antiquity who's imprisoned and he writes a kind of consolation, we talked with students about if you were imprisoned, maybe something happened, you were an activist and you were imprisoned, what's one book you would bring with you? You know, what's something that matters to you that would bring you comfort? And how does that relate to the kind of ideas and books that Boethius was referring to in his text? So finding that point of connection and drawing them in to the material, not to make it a less rigorous discussion, but I find that if students have that point of connection, they'll then go further with me into the complexity of the material.
We think that fundamentally, if the student's function is as passive receptor, that student won't take the material into him or herself, won't integrate the material into him or herself in a deep way, won't make it a part of him or herself, won't own it, as the phrase goes, and as a consequence stays on the surface, easy to slough off.
We have the Freshman Common Reading Program, which is relatively new, but I think that also puts out the expectation that we want you to do things outside of classes. We want you to come to campus prepared to talk about those things, and we want you to make connections to the liberal arts and the core curriculum and all of these new things that we're trying to do on campus. Students need to play an active role in that.
I think is really important about engagement is the questions, that how questions drive all learning. You know. Even faith, where you have answers, true faith, as Augustine puts it, is cogitare cum ascensione, thinking about the things that you believe in. An engaged teacher is an engaged learner. We're trying to communicate an understanding of how they themselves, what does this matter for them? You know, and so these questions have to be their questions.
Copying down what someone's saying and then just learning it, that's all I did in the European system in Spain when I went to school there. And it worked for me because I was a really good student and I was really shy. So for me, it was good. But again, does it really make you think? And yes, you may know the facts, but I don't think it encourages critical thinking.
It's with a lot of purpose that a faculty member can engage students. I think you really have to think about what your goals are for your class. Think about what your personal definition of student engagement is. Because I think in many ways it is idiosyncratic. There seems to be some common variables, but in the end, it has to fit your parameters and your expectations.
There has to be a balance. I think it's very important that the professor does encourage you to talk and to participate. And I guess raising good questions is what makes you want to talk and makes you want to think. And I guess that's what we're here for.
Superfluous or something. It seemed like, I don't know if you guys disagree with me. I thought that like there was something about seeing the individual kid say like, I want this. That maybe on the one hand it made clear something that I think was already clear. So I'm not sure if there was another purpose to it. It seemed like to not be like that productive as an element. You know what I mean? But I did think to go back to what you said, where the two elements.
Challenging students from the very first day to have to be involved, to get involved in a debate or do a role play or, you know, lots of these other exercises does set an expectation for their enthusiasm, their involvement, their own investment in the course.
I think that the student needs to come into the classroom with an open mind. I think that's probably the most important thing. I think that's probably the most important thing for both the professor and the student is an open mind, and not have a completely fixed set of ideas or thoughts about how the classroom will run.
There has to be mutual respect of the two parties that are interacting with each other, and I think that it has to be deliberate, it has to be active, and there has to be an acknowledgement that you're offering me something, and I'm accepting what you're offering me. And I think that's where the mutual respect part comes in.
For an engaged classroom, there shouldn't just be, this is the syllabus, this is what we have to do. They have to put their creativity into it and also have the students' input into it. Also have the involvement of the students as well, not just the teacher, because a classroom is not just the teacher talking to tables and chairs. It's students talking to teachers talking to the students. They learn from each other. For me to have engaged students is to have a class that's unpredictable, because I have to be able to respond to the unforeseen. And so sometimes I think of an engaging class as a conversation, because a conversation is not predictable. If I think about teaching or my students as kind of apprentices, then I have to give them as many opportunities for doing independent philosophical thinking as I can. And so I'm going to experiment with letting them lead classes in different ways, seminars or presentations, or giving them a little more independence than I have in the past. And that means I have to allow them to make mistakes that go uncorrected, and that's hard as a teacher, but I think that's part of having that kind of conversation or apprenticeship.
I think that some of the others have mentioned some of the courses that had an impact on them, forming how they think about it. And I have to agree with that. The courses that I felt opened my world and made the world a lot bigger were ones in which we were given a lot of responsibility to think about things, and we were sort of trusted to address it, not just given information or talked down to in a way. I think when the professor sort of establishes a community in the classroom and you feel part of it, then you can exchange ideas, and it makes it very easy to feel part of it and feel like you're being listened to. And that's what we try to do, even though the courses I teach in general chemistry do convey a lot of information, I think that a big part of my job is to illustrate why knowing this is important and why problems that face society today can be answered by knowing some basic information and then going further from that.
I think it's now the age where the students who can express themselves in ways that are different than just using text-based. So the artists, the dancers, the students who are comfortable using technology, who are using Twitter or creating video montages or photo montages, it's their time now to demonstrate their knowledge, and that it should carry the same weight as text-based. We are in an age where there are some big issues and big problems that need to be solved, and we need these people to be able to think outside the ordinary realm.
I've learned that each faculty member brings a different set of experiences and a different set of expectations in terms of their own teaching and students' learning. And I've learned that our faculty members are very passionate about what they do, and in order to grow as teachers and in order to raise their standards for students, we need to meet them on individual levels, such as the way we have through the student engagement faculty seminars. I think each faculty member has had an opportunity to bring their own experiences to that conversation and then decide what they could take away from it. And in my work at the CTE, what I've learned most in the last 5 years is that working with faculty one-on-one or in smaller groups allows for that individualizing of what they need in order to grow as teachers.
What for me, I think, struck home with Donald Finkel's Teaching with Your Mouth Shut, which I personally am probably not courageous enough to do, had to do with a concept that I've grown up with, and that is the Hebrew concept of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is a Hebrew word that means that actually it's about God. It's about that God shrunk God's self. That is the act of tzimtzum in the act of creation to allow creation to come to be. It has a wonderful metaphor for relationships in general, that in relationships, alternately, you shrink your own ego, your own persona, to allow the other person to be and to grow. And I think it's a fabulous barometer for what can happen in a classroom, that if the teacher, in fact, can shrink his or her persona, presence, ego, at least some of the time, it leaves room for other people to come into their own, for other people to grow.